How's everybody? It's so good to see you. Do you know how glorious it is outside? It's just so gorgeous. We need like an outside amphitheater to do this, don't we? I started a church, and that's where we met, an outside amphitheater. So it was great. Like when the sermon was really boring, they could watch the geese fly by and land on the lake. It was awesome. I want you to imagine that you have the responsibility to honor somebody. They've accomplished something, and you get to pull off the party in which the celebration for that accomplishment is shared by hundreds of other people. You got it? It can be a first birthday, or it can be an 80th birthday. It can be induction into the World Series, into baseball's Hall of Fame. So you know what you would do? I got to be present for such an event on Monday night, April 16th. In 1982, the National Endowment for the Arts teamed with the Kennedy Center to come up with something called Jazz Masters, an award giving to the best jazz players. Anybody a jazz fan in the room? A few. A lot of us. So there are about 100 that have been honored, and on that night, 4 new people were going to be inducted. If you were to see the ones who had been inducted in the past, who would include Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie, Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan. The 4 that were inducted this Monday night were Diana Reeves. Anybody know Diana Reeves? It's like the greatest, most delicious voice you've ever heard in your life. Todd Barkin, who was a promoter of jazz. Joanne Bracken, who teaches at Berkeley and is called the Picasso of the piano. And Pat Metheny, who's been strumming on a guitar for like 50 years. The way I got there was my son, Ben, gave the tickets to me to celebrate my 63rd birthday. So knowing I like jazz, to honor me, he got the tickets. Well, he didn't get the tickets. His girlfriend, Kelly, was in a bus riding to work when she got a text from the Kennedy Center saying that this event was happening and the tickets were free. And you got them on a first-come, first-served basis. And instead of doing what I do, which I put that in a folder to remember that I then forget that I created. Anybody do that? She hit then. So what happened because she hit it then was orchestra seats, row L on the left side, 20 feet from the balcony where the 4 inductees are seated. I am on the row I am seated next to Pat Metheny's wife and her children. This is a really cool night. So now the way they honor them is they did a video montage that lasted about 6-7 minutes that summarized their career. Then they got to speak. And then they had the youngest, hippest, best jazz players for each of the 4 genres, a different group flown in from across the country to honor the type of music they created by recreating it in their own youthful, fabulous way. It was magnificent. And so every time anybody did anything, because we were there to honor them, not to be entertained, no matter what they did, you stood and applauded, right? It wasn't about you, but the quality was so high that you wanted to applaud. But if I'm sitting next to Pat Metheny's wife, you know you got to stand up, right? What am I going to do, sit there? I mean, she can't sit there for everybody else. She's got to stand too, because she's going to stand for Pat, and then I'm going to stand for everybody. I didn't hold anything back. It was, yes, yeah, it was fabulous. It was fabulous. It's a fun thing, a great thing. It's an honor to honor people who are spectacular, don't you think? Saturday at noon on TV, I watched the funeral for Barbara Bush. Anybody else? And it was, again, but so much more somber, so different in tone. But the point was to honor, to find the thing that was excellent and make it known by others who may not know, so that they could celebrate this life that you know so intimately. At St. Martin's Episcopal Church, the largest Episcopal church in North America. Who knew the largest Episcopal church in North America would not be in New England, but would be in Houston? Because everything's bigger in Texas. Over 1,500 people showed up, and in a facility that holds almost 2,000, this brick facility that's glorious on the inside, with an Episcopal service, a eulogy that is gorgeous. The liturgy is magnificent. it was an incredible thing to watch. This all America history, basically, for the last 50 years, walk through the door and take their place to give honor to this woman who doesn't simply seem to be the mother of presidents, but the mother of the country. That's how she kind of feels to everybody. Barbara Bush. And they know when the service is done, her remains will be taken to the presidential library, the Bush Presidential Library. And there she will be laid to rest next to her 3-year-old daughter who died of leukemia. And it has to be that the people that are in the room, the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, know that this woman could have hidden in the shadows after the death of a child, but instead poured her life into their life, who found meaning in their success, who ran what Jeb called a benevolent dictatorship that wasn't always quite so benevolent, though I think it never stopped being a dictatorship. One of the most moving parts of the service was to watch, I think it was 6 of her granddaughters read from Proverbs, the 31st chapter, about a woman as a gift to her family. And as it was read, each one cried. Cried because sometimes 31st chapter of Proverbs becomes a box we ask women to live up to. And that wasn't what their tears were about. It was instead that somehow these scriptural words were an exact fitting description of the mother they knew. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her happy. Her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done excellent, but she surpasses them all. Honor. Yesterday morning, 9:30, I drove to the administration building at Arlington. A member of our congregation who had been with us for almost 50 years, nearly the beginning of Aldersgate, Elza Mae Johnson, was laid to rest. In the administration building, I met all of her family. We talked, and they told me stories about her, magnificent, incredible stories. She was a woman who loved dynamite and loved to blow things up. It's the only time in a eulogy I've ever been able to use that story about somebody blowing things up. I found out later that the whole family didn't know that was one of her pastimes, and so now because of my saying it at the service, they have to tell the story to everyone. I was just trying to bring honor about the places she traveled and what she loved, her battle with cancer and dementia and osteoporosis, and that she would have described those horrible conditions as the price she paid to have a wonderful life. The great thing about Arlington on a Saturday is that it was quiet. There was nobody there. Can you imagine that? There was nobody in the administration building. We ran into nobody in the roads. And we made our way to the columbarium, to the north section, and her remains were placed in a top niche. And they somehow thought, because they thought she was the top of the world, that it was the right place for her. And they stayed until the marble plaque was put over the front to honor her. In the next 2 weeks, we will honor Paul Powell, a member of this congregation for a long time. 71 years of age, he suffered a stroke on Tuesday, debilitating stroke, that took his life on Friday. Kathy sings in our choirs and teaches in our day school, and had no idea, was not ready for this to come. And so when she is overcome by grief, she's going to be thinking of how in the world do you honor a man and his character and his accomplishments. Their one daughter, Sarah, will be flying up from Jacksonville to be part of the service. And what was upon us, what we have to do is, how do you honor someone well? How do you honor someone well? I want to talk about the Gospel of John and the Gospels as an attempt to honor the life of Jesus Christ. That is not just what a historian would write. It's not trying to simply get the facts right. It's trying to honor someone, that they found in Jesus Christ something so magnificent, character so fabulous, power so rich, this as if Jesus was the source of life itself. And they want to honor it. They want to tell a story in such a way that when people read the book, they get it. They get that this is more than a biography, But they have found a new fulcrum point in the world. They have found the world's center. And when they tell this story to someone else and they get it, they themselves are transformed by the source of life that becomes theirs. In the 8th and 9th chapter, you have an encounter between Jesus and a person who's born blind. The disciples have the great word, why was this person born blind? Like everything that happens in the world has to have a why, right? There are no mysteries anywhere. Just tell me why. Who sinned? Did this man sin? Does that make any sense to you? Does this man who was born blind, did he sin? Would you just say that again? The man that was born blind, did he sin? Did he cause this? Well, that just seems like too much to ask, doesn't it? Did his parents do it? I bet it was the mother's fault. She did something, she ate something, she looked cross-eyed. It has to be the mother, doesn't it? And Jesus says the most interesting thing. I want you to hear it. I don't know what to make of it, so maybe you'll tell me. He said this happened because of the future, not because of the past. Does that just strike you as the strangest thing to say? This happened because something's being pulled out of him, not something is pushing him. Don't worry, the disciples had no idea what he was saying either. And so he tells them a story. He tells them the story of Moses. So he goes back. John is a Jew. He understands all the Jewish stories. So when Jesus tells a story like this, John wants it recorded because it's a Jewish audience. He tells the story of Moses. Moses, who was raised to be a king, who when he was a prince attacked the soldiers of the king, was forced out of the country, went to another world where for 40 years he became a sheep herder instead of a prince, taking care of the sheep of his wife's father. Like the worst job you can possibly imagine. You not only have to live with him, you now have to work for him. 40 years in, he sees a burning bush, and in the burning bush, he's told to go set the people free who have been slaves in Egypt. Hadn't seen him in 40 years. That's your job. He's got to be like 80 years old. 80 is how old John was when he wrote the Gospel of John. 80 years old, you're going to tell him to go do this? He can't do it. Moses says, okay, I'll go. But if I go, who do I tell them sent me? So that they don't think it's just all on me. I'm an 80-year-old man. Who sent me? And in Hebrew, God says that his name is. Now, he wants to know the name because he wants to know which God. Israel's God or his father-in-law's God or one of the Egyptian gods, because there are multiple gods. Which of the gods? Which of the gods I know? Which God did this? And the voice says, I am that I am. I am the salvation that is unfolding in front of you. I'm not the God behind you. I'm not the God of the past. I'm not the God you remember. I'm the gift is ahead of you. I am. That's a remarkable thing. So that when this person is born blind and they ask what caused it, who was the God from the past, what caused it? Jesus says, I am. That is, there will unfold in front of you God's salvation right now. It's not simply something you remember, but something God's doing now. Well, that's a powerful thing. And when he uses the word I am, everybody knows that's a reference to God. So you know what they do? They don't say, thank God we've been waiting for you. They pick up stones to kill him. And he goes into hiding. There's this magnificent thing in which John gets that Jesus is the source of everything you seek. So he is both this thing that's greater than you, and he is this thing that is within you. It's like having Barbara Bish, those grandchildren, know that she was greater than they think they will ever be, and her DNA is pulsating through their bodies. It is this thing that is totally other, and it's also part of me. That Jesus Christ is totally other and is part of us, in us, God's salvation is with us. So when he writes so that people will get it. Tammy Jo Schultz piloted a Southwest airplane. After its engine exploded in mid-flight, the cabin lost its pressure and a woman was sucked out. 7 people were injured out of nearly 200 on the plane. She is one of America's first fighter pilots who is in a commercial flight. And what I've heard, I wasn't there. What I've heard was when the plane began to descend 20,000 feet in 6 minutes, she stayed on the radio talking to the passengers to calm them down, to tell them what she was going to do, and to tell them not to be afraid. Can you imagine that? What she told a friend is the first thing she said was, "God, the steering wheel is yours." Now, I have faith, but it doesn't take a whole lot of evidence of the opposite being true for me to give up my faith and say, "Oh, I was wrong." An engine exploding, the cabin losing pressure, and falling 20,000 feet probably would be enough evidence for me to go, "Oh, no, there's no God. This faith isn't going to work. This is done." But she claimed that the calm that the passengers heard in her voice was from the faith that believed God had them in God's hand. Amazing thing. So John is writing to do that same thing, that this is all of the power of God that is present in Jesus Christ, and I want to honor that so that when you see it, you'll know that that power, that glory, that regenerating radiance of grace is available to you. He writes to honor this glory that is God in Jesus Christ. I would like your help to honor 3 people. You ready? I want you to help me honor over the next couple of months Carla Kincannon, Jason Michelli, and Emily Moore Diamond. Here's what I'd like us to do. Carla is going to have a retirement party because she's been doing this thing like 100 years. You look really good for the person who's been doing it. Longer than me. I'm a lot younger than you. So we have been incredibly blessed that Carla has brought fantastic art, a team of people, and more art. So her own art is in the building. She inspires other people to do art through the building. She offers her word and her presence to us. That has been a gift for 2 years. I know that whatever is expressed through her art, whatever is expressed through her sermon, it doesn't come close to the depth of her experience of God's regenerative, radiant grace. And that I know whatever she's doing, it is barely able to express how magnificent that grace is to her. It is just such a gift to be in the presence of someone who has that, who has devoted their life to honoring the life of Jesus Christ. Of all the places she could be and all the things she could do, that is what she does. I want to honor that. On June 9th, there'll be a party to celebrate her retirement and inviting people from across the country who have worked with her to be part of that. And then on June 10th, there'll be a party during the 3 worship services in the morning and then a barbecue in the afternoon. I hope you'll be here for that. And in addition to honoring Carla, I want to honor Jason Michelli. Now, I know that Jason is like a bowl of chili with too many jalapeno peppers. Burns your mouth, makes your eyes sweat as you go to the very bottom of the bowl, eating every last bite. That he is what Carla called an acquired taste. I also know that Jason's one of the greatest preachers in America. I've told you that before. The person who ordained me is Bishop Kenneth Goodson. One of his claims to fame is that he was the preacher on something called the Protestant Hour back in the mid-part of the 20th century. He was recognized as one of America's great preachers, and that's where he was able to practice, to offer his gifts to the world. Jason is going to appear on that same show tonight. It's called Day One. A new name, but it's the same idea. The very best Protestant preachers in America are given a chance to share their stories. Now, when Jason preaches, he is listened to by people on his podcast all over the world. But you should know it's a unique thing that he practices the craft for us, not at us. And what I mean by that is he watches us in the Soviet safe way. He watches us when we drop off our children at the day school. He knows the pretenses and the sins of our lives, and he will, with wit, humor, and vulgarity, crack open the pretense of our lives, and with the sharpest wedge imaginable, will with a hammer crack us open, so we can't pretend that the pain of our lives and the sin of our lives doesn't actually have hold of us. And when it cracks open, we scream in pain, and it's only then that we will let grace reach the depths of our personality. It's a hard thing to have a pastor who cares enough to offend us so that we will see beyond our lives to the grace that is greater than us. So I want to honor him. And on June 10th, he will be part of the celebration. I will try to stop him from talking too much. It's the hard thing. His sermons go on forever. Then I want to honor Emily, who's coming to join us. And I guess I'm saying that Emily that's coming, I don't know a whole lot about. I know about what's listed in the page. It's what you know. My faith is that great things, salvation, God's faithfulness, are in her future, not in her past. Not that her past is bad. It's just we're forming a partnership. And that partnership isn't simply to be nice, but to be engaged in the salvation work that God does in the world. And I want to do it with her. She's been an associate pastor at River Road United Methodist Church in Richmond. She was at Warsaw, where she was a pastor and made the congregation grow. She's presently a chaplain. She's incredible gifts. She's smart. She's engaging. She's winsome. She's Southern in a way that you'll know exactly what I mean as soon as you hear her talk. I want you to give her a platform for her ministry to grow. When Carla came, the first thing some members of the congregation said to me was they're surprised that she wasn't Hetty. It's kind of like they knew who Hetty was, and so if you had a female minister, shouldn't she be exactly the same? And you know that's not true. And so at some point you had to know that Carla wasn't Hetty, that Carla was Carla, and that's all she could be. I want to remind you that when Jason came 13 years ago, he wasn't everybody's cup of tea. And for the first 5 years, you came to me and complained about every sermon he preached. Either his choice of illustrations or his structure of the sermon and the outline wasn't 3 points in a poem, or the fact that he wore sandals at church. But now, 13 years later, you would pay anything for him to stay. That there's some transition we go through. And it seems right to honor the future of what God's going to do, to give some time, to develop a partnership, to find somebody who has the gifts with whom we can partner to bring honor and glory to Jesus Christ. That's why we're here. He is the source of life. He is the bread of life. He is the resurrection of the life. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the true vine in whom we abide. So I guess those are the three things I'd like us to do. So I add at the beginning, what would you do to honor someone? Well, this is what I'm asking. I'd like you to honor Carla, her art and her spiritual depth. I'd like you to honor Jason, his pastoral care and his brilliant craftsmanship of words, his faithfulness here for 13 years. And I'd like you to honor Emily and what is to come. How does it sound? Okay. I offer to you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.